Welcome to this presentation. Thank you for attending. In this space, we will be presenting the project entitled A Learning Challenge for a Multidisciplinary Quantum Information and Quantum Processing Workshop during Semana I. Semana I is the name in Spanish for the Week of Innovation and Research. This is a yearly event in which all undergraduate students of our university develop one of a series of proposed challenging learning activities related or not with their fields of study. In 2017, one of the proposed activities was the Quantum Information and Quantum Processing Workshop as a blended learning activity involving a nationwide group of students from 2nd to 9th semester in physics, mechanics, electronics, mechatronics, and digital systems engineering, who voluntarily decided to participate. This work reports the design, development, and the outcomes of such activity, with emphasis in the blended learning, orientation, and impact. First, the presentation outline is the following: the quantum information and quantum processing education and their importance. Secondly, the concept of Semana I. Then the blending workshop being presented here particularly. After we present the research objectives and methodology for this project, and then the most important part is the research outcomes and the discussion of them. Finally, we present the conclusions. Quantum information and quantum processing are emerging areas of knowledge employing quantum systems, particularly matter and light, as vessels of coded information, then processed by appropriate control. It could to allow solving complex computational problems in a more efficient and fast way than classical computing does. In this arena in which photonics, nanotechnology, computational science, and mathematics are being combined, the initial learning of those disciplines requires a basic knowledge of vector spaces, complex algebra, programming, physics, and basic knowledge of computational complexity. This area is growing in terms of the developments, but also in terms of the human resources being needed from here to until 2035 year. The Semana I was an activity to propose a related education activity. The Semana I is a yearly mandatory learning activity for the student at Technological Monterrey for a week. A main face-to-face challenge of intensive learning is conducted whether it's related to their discipline or co-curricular. Some guidelines for this activity are spaces to develop skills in scientific research. During 2017, a workshop in quantum information was offered as learning activity for engineering students supported by online resources under a blended approach. The goal for this activity was to propose a tentative project to be developed during a subsequent research stay, culminating in a scientific publication. The workshop was also the opportunity to invite participants into a one-year stay in the research group, an alternative to the students for the last 2 years of their academic program. The workshop goal was to provide some advice to the participants in their inclusion in this area of scientific and technological research. This activity was offered and developed in Mexico City as a nationwide activity. Was open to all students in the 31 campuses of Technological Monterrey, and with a final enrollment of students from cities spread across all Mexico in different cities. It was based on a previous week of online preparation, following a set of materials, particularly lectures, practice, and podcast. Then in the face-to-face component, properly the Semana I activities during the following week to this blended component, a series of key introductory lectures followed by practices on an own quantum simulations software generated by the research group in Technological Monterrey, and including problem-solving activities in associated research problems. There they were grouped in 5 teams of 5 students. Then the project objectives for this activity during the Semana I was the activity was offered and developed in Mexico City, but open for all students across the country. And it was based on a previous week of online preparation using the Tangle Suite. The Tangle Suite is a group of blended learning materials to conduct a previous online education in this area. Then after this week we use some additional lectures in the face-to-face component to then go to the research activities for involving these students. The period was October 25 to 29 in the previous years. There were 25 students coming from the 7 states of Mexico, and they were voluntarily enrolled in this activity. For this report, the research objectives are to set the relation between the SumCate analytics for the online component with the performance demonstrated in the face-to-face component. This is very important because intention is evaluate the value of the Tangle Suite materials because this is a more deep pretension of our research group in quantum information, trying to attract different students in the future from particularly from Latin America and of course of Mexico mainly. The second research objective for this presentation is to relate to last quantitative elements with the quality of the final product of the workshop, the research proposal coming from the group of students in order to possibly in the future participate in the research group of as an state research for the undergraduate students. The third aspect is to evaluate the usefulness of the workshop from the participant viewpoint. Okay, there are some important results here. The fifth is the related with this figure, which is showing the online performance grade percentage distribution based on 6 classes, grouping different students in terms of the use of the materials and the performance. This distribution exhibits a two-peak behavior here and here. Some students fulfilling the most of requisite materials and another barely covering them. And this is reflected in terms of the relative frequency of online performance for the online materials. Then together the line here included reports the average of non-online grades in each class during the Semana I activity, the face-to-face component, denoting certain dependence of the improvement of this grade. With respect to the full coverage of the online materials, there are an average difference around 20% in the student development during the face-to-face sections of the workshop. In the figure, there are some evidence for the dependence in the full and correct fulfillment of the online previous activities. We are analyzing that possibly deeper in the following of the project. After, other point of interest is the relationships between the coverage of online materials with respect to the performance during the workshop in the face-to-face component. Figure presents the dispersion plot between the online grades versus the non-online performance, including the quality final product grade for each student, the dark dots. The linear tendency is shown as a solid line depicting a low correlation with Pearson coefficients around of 0.22. As construct, the linear tendency eliminating the outliers is obtained, reported with light dots here in orange. improving the fit with 0.63. Note those outliers are students with poor representation performance, giving no online grades below of the general standards. By splitting the group of students in two groups, one of them having online performance larger than 0.7 and another with lower performance, then we run an one-factor ANOVA test with a p-value equal to 0.05, giving statistical evidence for the impact of online performance on the online performance between the both groups. Here, another outcomes is to evaluate the different average aspect of grading through the workshop. The figures show the mean value of grades for the population, the solid line in the scale of 0 to 1, together with two dotted lines stating the range around the average mu and the average deviation sigma, reporting the variation between the mu or the mean minus or plus the standard deviation. It exhibits very good outcomes and consistency. Note that the innovation element appear notably more spread. Particularly this part, this is an aspect expected as a challenge through the workshop in terms of the final product being required, an original proposal of research in the field. Note that circular arrows sweep the dimensions grouped together in the integrated dimension being pointed by their heads, despite we present each outcome individually. These two for this, and this is only these two integrated in face-to-face, and so on. Finally, from the point of view of participants, was evaluated through a survey applied after of the workshop. In a 0 to 10 scale, where 10 is the best and 0 the worst. Dimension in the survey covered aspect as clear politics in the workshop of evaluation, clear evaluation particularly, the assessment during the workshop by the researchers, the inclusion of new concepts being treated in addition to the blended part of the workshop, the motivation to reinforce their own attitude to improve the learning through the workshop, the adequate methodology used in the workshop, the existence of spaces for the reflection during the workshop, the usefulness and the social value given to the workshop. Finally, the final question was asked to the students about the challenge level that the workshop has symbolized in this part. These are the results. The orange line reports the mean, and the other lines, green and purple, reports the variation with respect to the mean here, denoting a very consistent evaluation by the students. Outcomes are mostly consistent and highly valuable, having the most significant figures of improvement in its usefulness and the possible lack of reflection spaces. Attitude is represented with some dispersion, despite this aspect was not clearly perceived by the researchers conducting the activity during it properly. Finally, the conclusion: Semana I was an excellent opportunity to prove some blended learning materials generated by the research group in the Tangled suite. This is a more complete arena to develop this kind of education. And there are two notable aspects in this experience: the possibility to include quantum information and quantum processes in the education of undergraduate engineering students to attract them to the novel and emerging trends of scientific research. The other aspect is the planned use of blended design to research the learning with students far away by hundreds of kilometers who decided to spend a couple of weeks in this activity. This is very important. The experience has become useful for the research group to develop a more robust attraction for Latin American students in the future through the Tangled suite. Finally, we'll leave you the data of contact. Thank you very much to attend this presentation.